Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. We have a great topic to discuss today. If you were on social media whatsoever this past weekend, you maybe have seen influencers post about this article that came out stating Lucky Charms are healthier than steak. And I caught this because I do follow Joe Rogan on social media, and Joe Rogan has quite a large following at 16.1 million. His influence is high up there, right? I mean, anyone is either following his Spotify podcast or following him on social. So he has a huge reach, a huge influence. So he reposted this new government funding, quote unquote, food pyramid, says Lucky Charms are healthier than steak. So we're going to get to all the details on this, whether or not it's true and what this all entails. His post of this, which he even noted was a repost from Goodranchers, has over 40,000 comments. 40,000 comments. And just a bunch of people I follow myself, because I follow a lot of fitness folks and just people in this world. Many people were just reposting at some of the comments. Turn that pyramid upside down. People still think meat gives them cholesterol. A lot of magically nutritious comments. So eat the exact opposite of this, right? My keto life, all at the bottom, LOL. Did any of you actually take the time to read the study associated with this figure? If you did, you would notice it states we propose that the chosen algorithm is not well justified and produces results that fail to discriminate for common shortfall nutrients, exaggerate the risks associated with animal food sources, and underestimate the risks associated with ultra-processed foods. We caution against the use of the food compass in its current form to inform consumer choices, policies, programs, industry reformulations, and investment decisions. So please tell me where the government is distributing this figure as the new food guide pyramid. Just seems to me Goodranchers found the figure, didn't bother to read anything associated with it, and wrote an opinion article highlighting how incorrect it is, when the study itself admits it's incorrect and shouldn't be used for consumer choices. This post is misleading. You can't compare the scores from different categories, so comparing the score for ground beef with Lucky Charms is not how the compass works. You compare the scores within the category so you can find the best food substitutes for the category. I like this one. The graphic you shared is from a blog, not the publication. Don't fall for the fake news, Joe. I want to start out by saying this was actually a repost by a company called Goodranchers. So Goodranchers took this information and basically compiled it into a blog post that they put on their website. If you don't know who Goodranchers are, because I actually didn't, they are a food delivery service selling meat. So we have to point that out because a lot of what I saw on social media, even Jason posted it, was do we trust the government? This is the government funding this research telling us Lucky Charms is healthier than meat. And that information is coming from a secondary source where they took the information they wanted to share with you, again, with their own business purpose. So I am not saying the government isn't shady. I'm here to tell you I believe it is. I'm not a naive little gal. But we also have to consider the source and where the information is coming from. So before I went to just repost what Joe Rogan had, I had to do my own research on it. And the fact that it came from Goodranchers who's trying to sell you meat, of course they want to kind of sway this in their favor. Now, that's not saying Lucky Charms is healthier than steak, but I wanted to point that out before we actually dove into where this information came from. I will leave links for everything down in the description box below. If you enjoy this dietitian debunking these types of articles or talking it through with you so that you understand what the facts are, you understand what you need to know from these types of claims, then be sure you are subscribed to the channel. It is free to do so, and I will gladly continue to do more of these topics. We make nutrition so confusing, and I think articles and social media reaches can make it that much more conflicting of what we are to understand and what we're to do when it comes to our own diet. And devil's advocate, even every dietitian may tell you something different in terms of what's healthy or not. We all have a little bit of a different approach. I'm never here to tell you what your approach is. What I am here to do is share with you the real raw information so that you can be a better informed consumer and not get caught up in misleading information. So Goodranchers pulled information from Tufts University, Tufts Food Compass. So this was a 3-year study, if you will, where they developed what's called the Tufts Food Compass, which is essentially a scoring system. So I will leave Goodranchers article for you below. I'll leave all the links for you below. So if you want to kind of putz around and take a look at things and get the actual information and make your own decisions on this stuff, absolutely, you should do so. The first issue I have with what Goodranchers did and where this advertising went really wrong is they refer to this as presenting a newly designed food pyramid, which it is not. And I don't know where that came from, but that is the basis of this. And they're saying government funded food pyramid. So automatically you think this is replacing the food guide pyramid, which actually was replaced years ago. We went to something called My Plate, not as user friendly, but that is what we went to. But this is not replacing the food guide pyramid, nor is it a food pyramid. So it's a very different thing. It is a food scoring system with a whole different implication for how it could be utilized by the general public, you and I as consumers, as well as food policy, research, etc. So 2 different things we're talking about there, but number one, people see food guide pyramid and that Lucky Charms are above me and don't get me going. So everyone's all hot and bothered by that already when you're misinformed. The other thing is that Tufts did this full food compass. They have a whole article we're going to discuss here and where they analyze 8,000 different foods, okay? And they categorize those foods as well. And what Tufts did is they pulled out foods that they wanted to pull out and they compared them together. Goodranchers pulled this information and created their own chart. That way they could show you what they wanted to show you, getting their message across. So this isn't really an accurate depiction of what Tufts came out with. So you can definitely take a look at Goodranchers' article. Unfortunately, that is what made the headlines, and that is what makes headlines, is clickbaity titles, which is why we are keeping that as the name of this video, so that hopefully you clicked this video but got the right information. So when you head on over to Tufts and actually look at what they did, Tufts University came up with this food compass. Now, this is a food scoring system. This is not the first food scoring system that we have seen. Food scoring systems have been around for a while now, and part of what they did for validating their tool was comparing it against other food scoring systems that are out there, one called Nova. Let me just give you a rundown of what the intention was with this food scoring system. So Tufts Nutrition Science and Policy team developed this tool to help consumers, food companies, restaurants, etc., to help assist with making sound nutrition policies. So things like a food scoring system may not be something you and I would use in our day-to-day. In fact, it's not something I ever advise clients with because I don't find it super practical, tangible to use. It's just a little bit out there, but it can provide some structure for creating further nutrition policies and guidelines. The system looks at over 8,000 foods, and they compare 54 different characteristics in terms of health-related aspects of food and beverages, mixed meals, and they did that over the course of 9 different domains. 9 domains they utilized with their scoring system was looking at vitamins, minerals, food-based ingredients within that food, if there's additives, how much processing was done to it, specific fats that are comprised in that food item, fiber and protein, and then phytochemicals. So that was kind of the basis for looking at each food. They state characteristics and domains were selected based on nutritional attributes that could be linked to major chronic disease such as obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular issues, cancer, as well as the risk of undernutrition for mothers, elderly, and young children. Things were scored on a range of 0 to 100, so 0 being not very healthy, 100 being healthy. So if foods landed in the 70 to 100 mark, those are considered foods we are encouraged to eat, should eat more of. Those that fell within 31 to 69 can be 8, but should be 8 in moderation. And then things that fell in that lower range of 30 to 1 considered foods that should be minimized in our diets. So very simple. And they went and they looked at things across categories. So when you actually pull up the Tufts data, it's comparisons of food by category. So for instance, we have fruits. Fruits are compared within the same category, and they summarize one example where we look at different types of cherries being compared. So maraschino cherries, what you would normally see in a cherry pie, got a score of 26. Dried cherries that would have added sugar to them, a score of 55. And then raw cherries in their natural state getting a score of 100. Kind of makes sense, right? When you look at that example. So other categories include seafood, dairy, eggs, and meat are all lumped together. That is where we would see our steak. We have mixed dishes, we have beverages, grains. That is where you're going to see your Lucky Charms come in. Then we have savory snacks and sweet desserts. So those are the different categories that were looked at. They also looked at categories that got the lowest score. So the lowest scored category was our sweets, or sweet desserts and savory snacks. No shocker there. What I think occurred with what Goodranchers did is they took foods from those categories, mixed them in together, and then came up with their catchy headline that Lucky Charms are considered healthier than steak, according to this government-funded research program. So I just think it's very misleading what's out there and continues to be misleading. And I'm not saying that I fully support the information here or what Tufts has come up with their scoring. I think some of it's good. Some of it I don't necessarily agree with, but again, ask 100 different dietitians. You'll get 100 different responses, whether or not unsweetened almond milk should have gotten such a high rating. Okay, so everyone's opinion is going to be a little bit different. And within this article, if you actually look at, they have a press release, but then they also have a full-on article that lists out their methodologies. They have a set algorithm for how things were calculated, and they state some of their limitations within this article. Like I mentioned, they also compared this against 2 other scoring systems that are out there already, and they're really trying to improve upon the scoring systems that are already in place and being very transparent from what they're saying with it in hopes of it continuing to be further developed, further research happening to maybe in the future link things with better immune systems or better gut health responses. So I kind of like where they're going with it, but like I said, for use by a consumer, I don't think food scoring systems are helpful when it comes down to you and I heading to the grocery store. Let me know if you've ever utilized a food scoring system or what your thoughts are down in the comments below, or if you would be someone that would be interested in taking that approach in terms of your nutrition. Instead of counting macros, would you prefer looking at a food scoring system and saying, nope, unfortunately that food flunks, so I can't eat it, or I'm going to limit it? Would that be useful to you? I'm really curious to know. Going back to Goodranchers, the way they set up their graph, it lists Lucky Charms receiving a 60 and then ground beef receiving a 26. So kind of showing the ground beef coming in that should be minimized type category, whereas Lucky Charms are listed in that should be in moderation. And that is what gets confusing to people. We have to think about the information that they utilized for this to just say ground beef. It doesn't actually give us a percentage. We don't know what type of ground beef they were utilizing for this intention, or what type of steak. As we know, different cuts of steak, different cuts of beef or ground beef are going to make a difference in terms of the fat content. And we know fat content is one of the factors that they looked at in reviewing these foods. So they did look at the specific fat. So obviously, animal fats do contain higher levels of saturated fat. Doesn't mean it's better than Lucky Charms or worse than Lucky Charms. You're not comparing apples to apples, in my opinion. So I don't really think it's a good comparison to say you should eat one over the other. I don't think that's the intention of this food scoring system either. It's to look at things comparably and say, what's a better choice here for me? Like I said, I don't necessarily agree when I look at all the data that they have here in terms of how things are scored. But I would have to question Tufts a bit more in terms of what specific items they looked at. And maybe that information is available. I just didn't find it or research long enough. I do agree with what they're saying, though. In their press release, they mention once you kind of get beyond eat your veggies and don't drink soda, the public is pretty confused on what they should be eating. So I'm not mad at universities attempting to develop tools and things that could possibly work for people, because what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for someone else. So this could be a helpful tool for someone if it is in fact accurate and has good information that was used within this study. They list a summary chart as well that, shows nothing that we wouldn't not expect, that, things like raw vegetables, raw fruits, those are going to be high up there in terms of something that's encouraged we should be eating regularly, and that is seen across other food scoring systems as well. One of the benefits to this food scoring system, if we were discussing it against other food scoring systems, is that they do utilize a more diversified approach with assessing foods. So few existing scoring systems actually incorporate the evidence on the diversity of a food in terms of its attributes to health and what it can do for our health and preventing chronic conditions. So I think this is the first of its kind to do so. So hopefully they will continue to expand upon this. And that is how they developed it, an effort for it to continue to expand and improve. So some things that we know have known health effects, for instance, iodine and trans fats were not available. So that information was not available in the food nutrition database. And that is where they use that information. And they looked at things across the board according to a set serving size so that everything was compared consistently. And things like iodine, trans fat were unavailable, which, like I said, we do know have known health effects. So that was not included in part of this scoring system. We also have the influence of naturally occurring versus fortified. So there is no distinguishing in the database in terms of something being fortified with vitamins and minerals versus it naturally occurring. So that, again, could alter things. Maybe why you see Lucky Charms heading up that scoring system a bit higher, because we know it's fortified with vitamins and minerals. So maybe when you look at that compared to another item within that category, it's going to look like it's much more nutritionally sound when it's not naturally occurring. Other limitations, I think the scoring system, I don't necessarily agree with everything. Like I said, they scored unsweetened almond milk very high, and I'm not understanding why, because I'm not really sure the amount of nutrition that it provides. But if it's not taking into consideration it being fortified, I also didn't see 2% milk on there. It had whole milk though, so that scored very low comparatively. They had items like fast food fish sticks were a 40, even though they're fried, compared to that ground beef that came in even lower. So the scoring system to me is a little bit, it's unclear to me. I would need to see a bit more how they came up with some of this stuff or what exact items they're looking at. As we know, foods can vary quite differently from item to item based on the brand and what is in that food item. So some of their scores just don't make total sense to me, and then some do. There's definite limitations here. There's always going to be limitations when you have something as new as this. I do want to mention this study was done, or this food scoring system, I should say, the research was done in support by the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. They had a grant that funded that. So I think that's where you're seeing that new government-funded food guide pyramid jazz in social media. Not a food guide pyramid, but yes, this was funded through the National Heart Institute, okay? There is an interesting spot at the end of the article. I always like when you can find research that doesn't have any competing interests, but this one does have quite a few. So that does make me wonder how much of this impacted some of the food scoring. So they do list it for transparency at the end of the research article that they receive, who they receive fees from. They do have to state if they are paid or in cahoots with any other agencies, which there's quite a few here. I don't know them all, but they receive personal fees from Escati Pharma, Barilla. We know Barilla from pasta, Cleveland Clinic Foundation, Danone and Motive Foodworks, Celebrate, Day 2, Elysium Health, Foodome, Human Co., Perfect Day, Season and Tiny Organics, and then they list some other ones they get royalties from. So this isn't a totally non-biased research study either. How does research get funded that needs funding and needs money? So it's another good thing to be an informed consumer when you take this information, is looking at who's funding the research. Is there any negative influences there, or let me just say influences that could sway some of the results? If you've got a study about soda and Pepsi Cola is funding that study, it's going to be more favorable to show Pepsi Cola in a good light. So that's true when it comes to any research. At the end of the day, I don't think we're comparing apples to apples when we say steak is not as healthy as Lucky Charms. I say you can eat both of them in moderation in a healthy diet. So would I use this scoring system for myself? Not personally. I wouldn't use it with clients either. I think it will just confuse people that much more. I like to work with a client with where they're at, take an inventory of what foods you currently eat, what you enjoy, what's going on with your lab work, what kind of issues you're having, and go from there. So I'll be interested to see what comes from this scoring system moving forward. But I think this video was just a good reminder, if not nothing else, if you didn't learn that you can both eat steak and Lucky Charms, that you should just be careful with some of the misleading messages that we see on social media. It feels like when you have a platform and an influence, if you don't speak on things quickly, then you're ignoring stuff. Whereas for me, I more so like to take a step back. I like to see what information comes out from it, and then I like to do my own research. So sometimes I'm a little bit slower to put out my own message and my own take on it, but I do that in effort to be a responsible clinician. That's going to be it for me and my dietitian take on this up-and-coming food scoring system. Let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are on this topic. Were you misled? Were you confused when you saw this? Or is this new information to you? Don't forget to subscribe before you head on out of here. Also, be sure to hit that like button if you do like videos with this type of content. It lets me know to do more videos for you like this. So I hope you all enjoyed. Enjoy your Lucky Charms and your steak, and I'll see you in the next one.